Several years ago, I went into a trance state, actually in the woods. It was great. And I connected with the ancestors and I asked them about the question of vegan, vegetarian, herbivore, carnivore diet, all this stuff. Bring us some clarity, ancestors. I just let come through. It comes through. You'll get to know how this process works for me. And the first thing they did when they came through was laugh at us because they were just like, y'all just get so caught up in the wrong questions. And then you put like so much energy in the wrong question. Like stuff is, it's like, if questions are the portal to the clarity that will liberate you, and whatever that means in the specific context you're using it, then it's important that we're asking the right questions. I hesitate to say right because it's all right. However, there's a direct and there's many, many indirect. Okay. So if the goal is to create a question that directly asks what you actually want to know and will directly lead you to the actual answer you're seeking, we do a terrible job at that, they were saying. Like as a collective and in groups. And the group part of it is a big part of it because it's like we distract each other with each other. Because especially with this matter, with all the things, like with our connection to God, oh my God, that's probably one of the most destructive things about us as humans is how much we rely on groupthink to relate with God. It is such blasphemy to take a term from Yah. Now, that's not the topic we're on, but we're going to talk about food, and it's the same thing here. So we get so caught up in what everyone else is doing and saying and thinking that we literally don't do the one thing that's actually supposed to like give us the clarity that we're actually seeking. And there's two waves of energy that are kind of consuming us and our thoughts that distract us and take us completely off path from the actual question we should be asking, and that's what I'll share with you in a moment. And those two waves, one of them is the power and the wave and the whoosh, the momentum of the magnetic momentum of groupthink, of what everybody else is doing. Now, this too is part of our wiring. It's important. It's a very, very important social survival skill. Very important. However, as critically thinking human beings that are so taken away, we're so denatured that we can't think naturally anymore. And so we're in a time that basically what it leaves us with is that we have to question everything. You know, it's not supposed to be that way. We're not supposed to have to live on guard with our freaking people who are calling themselves our doctors and our healthcare providers. Come on now. You guys, we have to protect ourselves from our doctors. I cannot emphasize how fucking backwards that is. Oh my gosh, let me calm myself down because it's crazy. We have to protect ourselves from our so-called preachers. We have to protect ourselves from our so-called food providers. You guys, from our law enforcement. It's crazy backwards. We are supposed to be able to rely on the current of our culture. We're supposed to rely on the customs of our culture to keep us safe and protect us and prepare us to thrive in the world. We as Americans do not have that. That is not our experience. We have to be on guard for everything. So groupthink makes us susceptible to terrible decisions, terrible lifestyle decisions and patterns that become habits and become us and become who we are. Okay. One of them is associated then with like this crazy duality. We have this obsession over youth, but our entire culture kills any vitality in us, like by default. Like if you're not living on guard and young people, if there are young people listening, y'all don't even know the half of it. And the way that you have access to information to, one, be aware of what's going on, and two, to protect yourself and find alternative ways to protect yourself. We did not have that in the 90s and the 2000s. That wasn't a thing. It was every man for himself. You really had to go far out of your way to get to the resources and the information that was going to be able to protect you from this world. That's why we have 45-year-olds on all these medications, can't run, can't live life without physical mobility limitations and pains. So, groupthink has been terrible for us in terms of food, and it really spills over into what the second wave is, and that's ego. Oh my goodness, do we ever we have such an issue with attaching our ego to our food choices. Come on, people, now. It's ridiculous. Like, people lose themselves. Like, the most sensible, aware, balanced, otherwise balanced person will go bananas talking about food. It's so crazy. Man. Back in the, 2010s or something, whatever. I can't tell you how many friendships I had dissolve from the internet when there was just this big, huge clash between so-called plant-based people and people who eat meat and plants. Even if they're eating healthy, there's still this huge, just butting heads craziness to the point of just ridiculousness. I don't need to over-explain it, y'all. If you haven't been there, no, we're not that far from it from what I imagine, but I have tapped the fuck out because y'all crazy. So I have removed myself from all of those things usually. However, I guess I'm dipping back in today because this is coming up. So I saw this post talking about how eating meat is from slavery. And it's just so peculiar to me that we have this wave of people who are, they're riding this wave and perpetuating this wave and creating this wave. And it just reminded me of this conversation that I had with the ancestors years ago. So they started out by laughing at me. They told me that we get way too caught up in the wrong things, wrong question taking us down the wrong path for two reasons: groupthink, the influence of groupthink, and we can't think outside of groupthink. And then as a byproduct or whatever, an extension, it defines our ego. And so now we're so attached to our food choices in such an egoic way. And it's so egoic because people, like I said, they lose themselves and they really steep down into that ego part. And it's just weird. And even when they're not clashing with people, there is also often this sort of pride that is overextended in a way that it feels aggressive to other people. It feels, so it's weird. And both of those waves, the groupthink and the ego, they both take us way away from the actual clarity that we're seeking around food choices. Now, I also want to just revisit this. I want to give everybody some compassion here, because I really truly think, and it's just like with the vaccines and vaccinating your children kind of thing. We're in a shitty fucking situation when it comes to the decisions we have to make, the decisions we have to face as parents, especially, and stewards of our own bodies, because we should be able to rely on the authorities that are in charge of these things. We should be able to rely on our healthcare system to educate us and to protect us and to create medicines and things that are safe for us. We shouldn't have to be as educated as somebody who has a PhD's worth of education to be able to make informed decisions, to be able to stay safe, basically, in engaging with the healthcare system. We shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to rely on our doctors. We should be able to rely on our healthcare system in general and the culture that then was spurred from that awareness. So that's not fair. And so around this whole meat consumption question, it's not a fair question because we're doing crazy shit that makes the question skewed as fuck and difficult to answer because it's so nuanced. Because it's not just are humans built to eat meat or not? Because it's not. I wrote earlier today, we are not eating the same meat as our ancestors were. It is not the same thing. This is not the same quote unquote circle of life is distorted as fuck. This is not a circle. This is what? If you are just tapping into conventional meat, mainstream conventional meat, and eating that, the cycle of that, you'd have to change that cycle so much it'd look like a loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop. Because you're not just going to go and just imagine the natural organic cycle. You're going to have stops like the mass production ruining the environment. So you're going to have a whole loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop of what you have to do in response to the ruining environment. Then the health of the meat itself, so then it's how it's affecting the human. So then you have chronic health conditions, you have the mental health conditions, and then you have all the loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loops for that, like taking drugs for those things, for example. All the weight loss products you get sold, loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop. Like, this is our cycle now. And that's not even to the tip of the iceberg, but just gonna, let your minds wander on all the loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loops we have to do for the cycle of life now, right? But the organic one is quite simple. But we are not just living in the simple cycle, not living within the cycles. And that's the whole point of it. We're completely separated, denatured, taken out of the cycles, displaced from the cycles. So we don't know, we shouldn't have to research for eons to know how to feed ourselves. That's fucking nuts. The animals do not do that. They don't. And that actually is what brings us to what the real answer is, and the real valuable question that we could and should, I don't like to use should, but it would be really helpful and productive if we ask this question. And this is what the animals do. But they don't have to ask it consciously, but we need to ask it consciously now at this point, because we don't even hear it at all. What does my body say? What does my body thrive on? What does my body get sick on? What does my body feel high on in the moment, but then I crash and I feel like shit? We don't pay attention to any of these things. We just eat. And then we read in books and we hear from our friends how healthy eating is, and then we do those things and we ignore actually how our body's responding to those things. And it's not always like this, but it does get to extreme cases where people are literally malnourishing themselves for years. Because they are following faithfully a diet that they read about is the right way to live and eat. And they just ignored how it actually made their bodies feel. Or they rationalized it or explained it with something else, or maybe they masked it, or maybe they took a medication or whatever it might have been. But that happens. And of course, that happens if you just eat the normal American diet. You're going to feel like shit. Oh my God, it's terrible. Oh, you guys. I grew up on the standard American diet. I was such a sickly child. It wasn't until my early 20s when my health was so bad. At 18, 19, 20. What? My health was so bad that it drove me into studying health. And then I realized you can't just eat what they give you and what's available. We have to be on guard. We have to educate ourselves, and we have to be on guard. We can't just go to the doctors and trust them and take whatever they give us. We have to be on guard. We have to be educated. So, how does the food that you eat make your body feel? How do you feel immediately after you eat the food? How do you feel while you're eating the food? How do you feel an hour after you eat the food? How do you feel 3 hours after you eat the food? How do you feel a week after eating that food consistently? Most people they never ask themselves these questions. But these are the only actual valid questions according to what the ancestors told me. Those are the only actual valid questions that will lead to helping you understand how you're supposed to eat. Reading books and all that other stuff, because we live in the society that we do, and we're literally we're under attack. I try not to be too dramatic, and it might turn people off, but everything is literally created to harvest us. And we do have to understand that. And so there is a need for external education because we have to understand what they're doing to the food. We have to understand that. And then we have to contextualize that with everything. But the very most first and primary question is, how does it make me feel when I consume it? So once you make an educated decision on what to purchase or grow, then once you consume it, how does it actually make you feel? You have to think about physically, you have to think about mentally, you have to think about spiritually. How clear are your thoughts? How much energy do you have? When is the last time you asked yourself these questions? So that is the most important question to ask, to lead you most directly to the map of how you should eat. That's what the ancestors say. And now there's one other layer here, and that what you will find is that energetically, as you listen to your body, everybody's going to be different, for one. Everybody's going to have different portions of what's good and what's not. Everybody's going to have different things that help them thrive and otherwise don't. And we'll each have our own relationship with that in this, utopia. We're all so in tune with our body that we're eating how our bodies actually want us to eat. And we're thriving. We're eating food as light, food as medicine. We have such a distorted relationship with food in this country. Oh my gosh. I'm not even going to go down that road because it's just, we all know. But if we can begin to shift our brains to thinking about our food as our medicine, our food as our filling ourselves with light, L-I-G-H-T, light. Eating for light. Eating for light. If we can actually use that as a guide, then that will lead us in a lot of ways, a lot of directions. And we'll see the light in our bodies and our energy. We'll see vibrance. We'll see it in our eyes. We'll see it in our skin. We'll see it in our energy levels. We'll see it in our levels of optimism, or like how we're able to see basically any type of situation or context and be like, oh, okay, this is what I can do with these circumstances, and this is what I'm going to do and move forward, and have, everything can be sort of qualified good or bad. But when you really recognize what life is, you don't see that anymore. You just see everything is materials to do whatever you want to do. You just harness so if there's something that feels like contrast that says, oh, okay, I don't want this. I want to change this to this, and this is how I'm going to loop this and switch this, and this gives me clarity about this, and then I'm going to define this, and then right? You just use it as a material to create whatever you want. You don't be like, woe is me, or any stuff like that, right? It's different. So this is how you begin to see life too, when you're eating what your body wants you to eat. Because I'm just going to pull in a message from the last video, is that is also a primary way of tapping back into nature. We talked about how denatured we are, and so much of it is, oh my gosh, it's an understatement to say how much of it is because of our food. And it's very, 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 very purposeful, okay? So, and then we do it to ourselves because it becomes our culture and we self-perpetuate. So our food is so key in tapping back into nature, right? We've been split off of nature because, even how we eat, don't eat locally, don't eat seasonally. That's fine tuning, but we don't even eat real food. Like, we eat fake food, plastic food that's just been tampered with. Just ridiculous. It's crazy work what we do with our food. And our bodies don't like it. And also the medicines, the artificial everything, all of these things basically, I don't know, if you can take, okay, so if you can imagine a link in a chain, okay? The denaturing is us taking our link out of the chain. Okay, now let's just imagine that maybe the chain, I don't know, let's just say it's an umbilical cord chain, right? It's a transference of nutrients and energy, okay? And when we are linked into the chain, that's when abundance flows, thriving health flows. That's when we can see through what other people may call bad experiences, and we can just see them as raw material to do whatever we want to do, right? This is that part. We're connected with source that's linked into that. That's when we're undenatured. That's when we're natured. That's when we're renatured. That's when we are part of nature. That's when we are a cell of nature. That's when we're locked in to ourselves as nature. Okay. So when we eat fake food, put all these medicines in our bodies, artificial, harmful medicines in our bodies, when we breathe the air, for goodness sakes, when we take in all the messages of advertising that's in our faces all the time, all of these things actually take us off of the chain. They unlink our link from the chain, right? Then we're just like flailing, like imagine like a baby newborn. You don't swaddle them, you just hold them in the air. Their hands or legs are gonna be like flailing all over, right? That's how you are when you're denatured. And so then we gotta self-soothe, then we gotta be on some alcohol, that's when we gotta be on some weed, that's when we gotta be on shopping sprees, that's when we have to cope through life. I hate to bring it back, but oh my God, it's purposeful. Even then, the coping soothers or whatever are part of the whole thing of harvesting our energy. So anyway, we're not going into that right now. We're denatured. We have to get back in the link. We have to eat real food. So that's one thing that's true, right, for all of us. And now as a collective, this is an important thing, especially as Americans. More so than whether it's an animal or it's a plant, because honestly, they're all life forms, okay? That doesn't mean they're the same type of life form in that they're meant to be consumed in the same way, because they're not. However, we dismiss the sentience of plants as well, and we also dismiss the effects of how we grow our plants in mass monocrops, in ways that really harm our environment as well. Just like our meat industry terribly harms our environment, so does our plant growing environment, culture and processes. All of it is terribly destructive to the environment and to the human body and to the plants and to the animals. So we're actually kind of on more of an even playing field on all that than we realize. It's much more about how we are accessing that food, basically. It is all food. It's all part of the cycle, according to the ancestors. We don't consume it in nearly the same ways that we do in this culture, and this is part of what I'm saying. But animals are a part of this cycle of consumption. And it's not actual death, because that doesn't exist. It's just a recycling of energy. Okay, this goes back to the ancestral understanding of, honestly, the Europeans said it as, the sacrifice of the god for the sustenance of the future generations. They had that represented in corn. And that's what they celebrate in Samhain, is the sacrifice of the masculine energy for the sustenance of the whole. So that is a part of life, okay? And it's not this terrible, horrible thing. That's evolution, that's expansion, that's recycling. It's just energy transferring. It's this one being becoming another being. And now we do that. Now here's the point of it all. What we're doing and having these cows in crazy slaughterhouses and I used to live in the country. They just had like 1,000 cows back to back to back to back in stacks. That's fucking nuts. Not healthy for the animals, for the environment, or for us. Same thing with the chickens out there. Gross, gross, gross. It smelled so bad you could smell it for miles. And in that situation, and mechanically taking lives over and over and over in mass amounts, that is a completely different situation than how the ancestors related with the animals and the lives that they, I'm going to say took, but it's more of like take on. They took the energy on. They took the energy of the animal on. And I'm not going to idolize, quote unquote, all the cultures in the whole world and say that this is how things were done. But what comes through here is that the early humans did actually have a reverence for the lives that they transformed into energy and sustenance for their communities. And that is a completely different thing than what we're doing now. So we can't really have the conversation on parallel floors like that. And if we do, we also have to think about how we do our plants as well, because it's not that different. So then it's not about whether they're animal or plant. It's about how are we cultivating them? How are we accessing them? So eating locally, eating seasonally, eating whole, and eating within the natural cycle of things. So, obviously like foraging would be ideal as an example. And that seems extreme to us as Americans, of course, but that would be an ideal. Hunting wild food for food, that would be natural for each family to do. Or even if you had like a person who did the neighborhood family, even that would be natural. And they trade or something like that. There you go. The animal's eating off the land, then you're eating the animal. That is natural and healthy and thriving, depending on how your personal body type responds to all of that. You get to make that decision on your own, but it's not really about what's right and what's wrong. It's not really about that what works for you is what is the same for everybody else around you. It's just not. So we have to remove our ego from all those parts of it and stay in relationship with our bodies and how they're responding to the food, and also in relationship with the food and how we're accessing it. So even them showing me making eye contact with the creature, having a sense of gratitude, praying, even the idea that then became Christians praying over food, that's thanking your food is so key and vital. That's not a Christian concept. It's way beyond Christianity, and it's way pre-Christian. It's how do we exchange energy? When we take in the energy of another life form, we do it with reverence and gratitude. And that's not just with animals, that's with plants as well, ideally. Even when you're taking the life of a plant, you do it with reverence and gratitude. So what the ancestors introduced to me in the end is what I call compassionate consumption. Rather than getting all caught up in being meat eater, carnivore, vegan, vegetarian, plant-based, all these other things, like it really truly is about compassionate consumption. So how do you access it, and then how do you consume it? With gratitude, with reverence, with honor and respect for the cycles, with knowing your place in the cycles. Like, for example, the ancestors, there are cultures and times and levels of awareness where they would consciously and intentional about how much they would hunt and take from the land to keep the balance in order, and having an awareness of that and a reverence for that. All of these things lock our link back into the chain. Those are the things that keep our link into the chain. It's when we assume our role as a part of nature. So, especially in this day and age, like more so than ever in this culture, like, it's so important to use compassion as your measure. And it covers everything, because it's like how you can make decisions about what you're going to opt into. For example, what you're going to vote, use your dollars to vote with, for example. And it goes all the way down to compassionately listening to your own body and honoring what it's communicating with you as what is right and what's not, regardless of what your friends are doing or TikTok is telling you, or even well-respected medical journals or your doctor or books or any of that stuff. Like, those things can enhance or help you deepen into listening to your own body, but it has to start with the listening part. That has to be the primary authority for you, is what your body says. And of course, I'm assuming whoever's listening doesn't really need this part stated, is that I do not mean the immediate gratification of food, because that's not what we're talking about. Because if you eat that chocolate cake and it's so delicious and it's so comforting and cozy, but then, you have no energy 3 hours later, and your skin, you can see a little bit of flaring in your skin, whatever, right? That's not how food is supposed to make us feel. It's not how it's supposed to affect us. So that's another level and layer of compassion, is really listening to what helps your body thrive and letting that guide you. That's all that we have for you today. Thank you for listening. 1.